Okay, let's move on to example 2, which has to deal with multiplying functions. It says the demand, which we'll call D, in units sold for a company's brand of cell phones at price X in dollars is D of X equals 5,000 minus 10X. What is the company's expected revenue from cell phone sales in terms of the price X? Okay, so the first thing that we need to know or recall is that revenue is going to be the price times the demand. Okay, so I need to find an equation for price. I need to find an equation for demand, and then I'll multiply them together to get the revenue. So price, I'm going to call that equation P of X. And it says that the cell phone is price X. So P of X is just going to be X. All right. Now let's talk about the domain of this. If we're talking about the price of a cell phone, we have to think about what can it be and what it can't be. So I'm going to say the domain is going to be X is greater than or equal to 0. Maybe they're giving away the cell phone, so it's going to be $0 all the way up to how much ever they want to charge, but we're probably not going to have a negative price. Okay. So demand, they told us that equation. So we're going to say D of X equals 5,000 minus 10X. So that's my demand. Okay. So we're going to look at the domain of the demand. Now the demand, still, it's probably going to be a positive number. So I'm going to say the demand, which is 5,000 minus 10X, is going to be greater than or equal to 0. Well, now I could solve that for X. So I'm going to say 5,000. I'm going to add 10X to both sides is greater than or equal to 10X. And I want to get X alone. So I'll divide both sides by 10. If I divide this side by 10, I get X. Divide this side by 10, I get 500. So the domain is X is less than or equal to 500. Okay. Now, revenue. We said revenue is price times demand. So revenue, we'll call that R of X, is going to be my price. So my P of X, which we said is X, times my demand, my D of X, which is 5,000 minus 10X. Okay. Distribute that out, and we're going to get 5,000X minus 10. X times X is X squared. So my revenue, R of X, is 5,000X minus 10X squared. Now the domain of my revenue is going to be where this and that overlap. So it's going to be where my P of X domain and my D of X domain overlap. Okay, so let's look at that. My P of X domain says X is greater than or equal to 0. So that's here, and it goes that way. And my D of X says 500 is greater than or equal to X, or you could read it as X is less than or equal to 500. So here's 500. So X has to be less than that or equal to. So where do they overlap? Well, it looks like from here to there. So I'm going to say the domain is from a hard bracket 0 to 500, hard bracket, and it's hard bracket because they're closed dots or because it's or equal to. So my domain, we could write it like that, or we could say 0 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 500. Okay, so our revenue is 5,000x minus 10x squared, where your domain is between 0 and 500.